Before I start this video, I just want to make a couple of corrections from the last video, just so we're all clear. I did the combat system wrong in the first video, and then figure out that I was doing it wrong about halfway through this video. I was having the dice mixed up. I was doing the attacker's roll as the defender's roll. And the other thing is core movement. I was just moving cores around and converting spaces as I go. Someone informed me that that was not correct, and I had no idea because I've always played where the cores are just running around converting spaces. So I'm going to do that for like the first half of this episode, and then I'm going to correct it in the fall 1862 turn, and then I'm no longer going to do it. Because that's when I realized that I was doing it wrong. So excuse those mistakes. That will obviously change how I play and how I approach things, and I'll be learning it myself because, as I said, I did not know that's how the rules were. So forgive me for those, and let's get started. So, another disclaimer before we start. Somehow, I have no idea how, I managed to play 2 summer 1862 turns. So this video is a little long. You're also going to be wondering when you hear, oh, it's the 1862 turn, and then like 20 minutes later how you hear that it's once again the summer 1862 turn. So yeah, I have no idea. Maybe when I got to the end of the turn, I forgot to just move the marker. I have no idea. Honestly, I have never done this in a board game before, so I couldn't tell you how on earth I managed to do it. But there's 2. Now, what I could do is I could move the whole game forward a turn, and basically that will just act as the fall 1862 turn, and then the fall 1862 turn will be the spring 1863. I don't know, because that's what would normally happen, but everything, the strategic will isn't quite right. It would be a little bit off. I'm not sure exactly by how much. I mean, the same amount of strategic will would be lost. It would just be lost at the wrong time, which isn't a big deal. So maybe that's what I'll do, is just move everything back a year. Regardless, that won't affect this episode. I'll make that clear at the beginning of the 1863 video or the beginning of the 1864 video. Either way, you will know. You'll have a disclaimer at the beginning exactly what I'm going to do. But for this video, there is the spring turn, the summer turn again, and then the fall turn. So there's 4 turns in this episode, and I'll rectify that as far as the game goes. But besides that, this is the last thing that I think I did wrong this time. So apologies once again, and let's just get on with this. For the people, game or episode 2 is going to be the 1862 spring turn, picking up from the opening phases. We're into the full hands now. Both sides have been dealt out the full 7 cards they're going to have for the rest of the game. I can show you those now, starting off with the Confederates. This is off a new deck as well. Just to keep you updated, the strategic will is 117 for the Confederates and 103 for the Union. So the Confederates, Grierson's Raid, which they're not going to be able to use because it's a Union event. They have Davis towards the south, which gives them a nice little strategic will bonus. Dixieland, same way, another 3-point strategic will bonus. Baltimore Revolt, which puts a PC marker over in Baltimore, which is something. Strategy board, they can't play. Choctaw Indians, they can remove a card randomly from the Union hand. And then Commerce Reader, which reduces by 1. So there are 3 cards in here that they can increase and reduce strategic will, which is, largely what they're trying to do. They can just make it at the end of the game and not have lost, but the big thing is, driving that strategic will either of yourself up or of your opponent down. So, that's an important part, and especially if they can hold, their defenses can hold up this turn and they have time to play those events, actually for the events, then that could be good. This one is interesting. Confederate desertions is going to cause some forward death, basically do a attrition. Isham Harris won't be used. Railroad degradation, which is basically the Choctaw card, but for the Union.
elite units, which they can get on the Iron Brigade or Walker's Brigade, which is really nice because they can drop it in maybe with the Army of Northern Virginia or something like that, and can get a bonus on their die rolls. Plus, they got in Stoneman over in the Army of the Potomac, which whenever you attack from an army to an army without cavalry, there's an inherent loss that you get on the die roll modifiers. Basically, your army is going blind. You need cavalry as a part of your army in order to properly scout out and that sort of thing. So you get a die roll modifier for that. So that the Army of the Potomac is in better fighting condition than it was, and that would only help them further along. Personal advisor, I quite like this one. It allows you to replace someone at the top of an army for free without having to get rid of their or take their strength or their political value loss. So, like, we could get rid of McClellan or something like that. I'll have to make sure that I subtracted the points for McDowell, because I don't know that I did. But anyways, this isn't that important for that because we've pretty much got everyone we want where we want them. So this could be better for, you can also use it to permanently remove someone from the game. So get rid of Butler per se, or Fremont, as Fremont was historically, of course, removed. And of course McClellan was at some point as well. So if we wanted to get rid of somebody, we could do that, which is nice to have. Shiloh, it's a Confederate event, but it's 3 points, so that's nice. And Habeas Corpus, another 3-point card. So a lot more mobility in here, 2 3-pointers, a good 3-point event that they don't necessarily have to play, and then a couple of lower ones, a good mixture of events. I think this is a pretty good hand all around. So it's going to be the Union to start off, since there's going to be no, no campaign card to start us off. So it'll be the Union to go first. So the Union are going to lead off with not a dangerous one, but a risky one, kind of, because they're going to do this Habeas Corpus card, the 3 points to activate Rosecrans up in Washington, D.C., and send him with 3 strength points all the way around to Sabine City, so down here in Texas. So, of course, it's a port hex in the West Gulf blockade zone. There's only 2 ports in this area, so they could shut that down. That would be great. But this one is not guarded by a fort, a coastal fort. So that means it's a little bit easier to get in. But the problem with this one is it's going to be a small battle. And the only way this works is, it doesn't matter what the Union rolls. It can roll a 1 or a 6. They're good. The Confederates have to roll a 1, 2, or 3. If they roll anything else, 4, 5, or 6, then the attack will fail. I mean, it won't be a failure all that much. Rosecrans will just go back. But that's the only way this works. I could have parsed out a couple of other attacks. They can't really afford to attack a coastal fort right now because they don't have their amphibious assault modifier up. They have to play cards to do that, and they don't have a card that increases that. I think it's only events that increase that, as well as the blockade level. So they're not able to do anything about that right now. So they're going to try and hit these other soft, just regular hexes, like Jacksonville, Fernandina, Morehead City, places like that, as well as Sabine City here in Texas. So as I said, they doesn't matter what they roll, but they do need the Confederates to roll a 1, 2, or a 3. And they actually do manage to get the roll they need. So it's going to be a 3. And by the way, the combat results table is also right here. It's right above on the board. I'll just widen out. It's right there. So I can examine this too, which is nicer than having the... I don't really know if you guys like being able to see the combat results table. It might just be annoying to have me flashing it in front of you, so I'll do it some without it. I know you guys like to check and make sure I'm doing it right, which is good because I somehow manage to miss that all the time, which I don't really understand how it's even possible. But anyways, so the Union is, it's going to be a small battle. So the Union is going to have a roll of 5, which is a 1. It's going to be modified down to a 6, doesn't matter. And the Confederates will have a 3, which is not modified at all, because there's no modifiers for them. There's no ironclad, there's no fort, there is no Hunley, and there's no torpedoes. So they get no modifiers as far as I can see. Nope, none. So it'll be 1-0. They'll take a step loss down to 1, and they'll have to retreat. So they'll just go up here to. I have to make sure it's very. I'm trying to make sure I say it right. Nacogdoches, I think. It's like a very famous city I know in Texas, but I have never said it out loud. Like you can hear it in your head, but you never actually physically had to say it. I'm pretty sure it's Nacogdoches. Anyways, they're going to take Sabine City, and the reason that this is important is because Texas, despite that it's a huge state, only has 3 spaces on the board. You have to control all 3 of them, but if you do, you get 7 strategic will points, and the state basically comes back into the Union, kind of like Tennessee did after like 1862, and is officially brought back in later, but basically is converted, if you want to say. And that 7 strategic will points is the same as basically every other state. I mean, that's Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina. All those states are worth 7 as well. So despite the fact that it just has 3 spaces, it's still very valuable. So getting a foot in here and being able to go up and maybe even do a reverse Red River campaign and go south is big. So that's a nice spot they can start off in and give the Confederates some worries, because that's the thing is they can stand toe-to-toe with you for all 5 years, basically, as long as you keep attacking them head-on the whole time. You can never throw enough at them. I mean, maybe you can wear them down, but it really just doesn't work. You have to find ways to poke holes in them from other directions. That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. So this is part of that. This is part of beginning that process of finding cracks in the walls and slowly whittling away the Confederacy state by state. Because remember, every state that is recaptured by the Union, that's 1 less strength point that they get in reinforcements. So once we start to peel off Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, they're only going to start getting 6, 5 reinforcements every turn. And that's going to really, in the long run, be very difficult for them to handle. So over to the Confederates now. So we're a few turns on from the last time. The Confederates brought down Pemberton from Dover, marched him down into Marshall, brought in some reinforcements to try and shore up that front. And the Union got Halleck back into supply. And I also forgot to subtract the 5 from war weariness from the fall turn. So the Union are actually on 95 strategic will. The Confederates played some of their cards and now have their strategic will up to 123. So they're a good few points ahead of the Union now. But the Union played in quick succession a couple of cards. First off, they played the elite units and got Wilder's brigade and the Army of the Cumberland. They played the Confederate desertions and hit the Army of the Tennessee with that to reduce their numbers. And then are launching an attack now. So it's going to be 10 against 6. The attack on Lebanon, and the modifiers are going to be 3 for the Confederates as well as 3 for the Union. And there's no, as far as I can tell, no other modifiers because the force strength is not over a certain number. We can zoom in here. Here's the attack in Lebanon. And a decent result for the Union. So it's going to be a medium battle because it's 16 total. It's going to be the defenders' role. I think I've actually maybe been doing these attacks a little bit wrong. Yeah, I think I've been doing the attacks wrong. It's just a bit confusing from the way that this is worded. It looks like that's the attacker's role and that's the defender's role. It's actually not how it is. This, the combat results table on the board explains it better. It's defender's role, attacker's result. So basically that's the... I thought it looked weird. The way that it was set up. Honestly, I was like, well, I don't know why the losses are tapered that way. Just looking at the combat results, I would think that usually the defenders always have, numbers like this, and then the attackers are the ones. Why would they need, if it's always, the defender's always on a tie. So yeah, I was doing that wrong. I don't know how much that would have affected in the last turn, But I'm just going to carry on, obviously, this way. So I've actually had those mixed up. I've been working on the wrong side. So it's a medium battle. It's going to be a 6 for the Union and a 2. And then a 4 plus 3 is a 7. So a 7 on the medium table is a 2. And a 9 on the medium table is also a 2. But the 2 has the asterisk next to it, which means that the Union will win. So that's going to reduce the strength points of the Army of Tennessee by 2 down to 4. And it's going to reduce the Army of the Army of the Cumberland from 10 down to 8. But the Army of the Tennessee will have to retreat. Now, they were not more than double their strength when they began, so they're going to have to just stop in Lebanon. And I'm not sure if you can automatically convert the space. I haven't figured that out, if you just ending in there, or whether you'll have to start the next turn. It's never really a big deal, so I'll just leave it for now. But yes, I did do the combat wrong in the first video, but I figured it out, so no harm. Well, there probably was some harm. But that's going to force the Johnston to rethink things. He may just pull back to Nashville and try and set up a fort there, and then send Forrest, who's Nathan Bedford Forrest, the infamous racist and Klansman. Anyways, for what he's known for during the war is being a very accomplished cavalry general. And what they may do with him is send him around the back and just tear apart Burnside's supply routes, which is what he and the Confederates cavalry did in the West, really, to a great effect, was disrupt supply lines. So they can probably afford to draw Burnside in and then send Forrest around the back to go in and just tear things up, because there's no cavalry support there. Actually, there was supposed to be a dice roll modifier for that, because the Union does not have cavalry. So they were actually supposed to have a -2 to their roll, which would put it at 7 and 7. So the result would have been the same. It would have been a 2 asterisk still, so it wouldn't have affected this one. But that's something to remember, is that the Union only have 1 cavalry general for a little while. So they're not going to be at even strength here when they fight. They're going to have a -2 to their die roll modifier. Didn't affect them this time, but in the future, that will be something to possibly come back and bite them. But that's going to cause Johnston to rethink his strategy, because he's at 4 strength points now as compared to 8, which means that he can be attacked twice in a turn now that they have double the strength. He could attack him once and then attack him again. And Burnsides can move on a 2, so he's even more dangerous. So it may be best for him to pull back and set up some defenses. Actually, they can't attack and get into Nashville because of they'd have to knock this fort out first. So if he pulls back to Nashville, he'll be safe there. In which case, he may peel off somebody to go in and do some damage over in eastern Tennessee, which is pro-Union territory anyways. So anyways, just some more strategic stuff to think about. Over to the Confederates. So I just finished up the spring 1862 turn. Not much more happened. Johnston withdrew into Nashville, so he's safe from an attack from Burnside. The Union removed Fremont from the game using personal advisor. He's especially good to get out, him and Butler, because they are high political value and low everything else. So it's good to get rid of them. Butler's another one that you'd like to move on at some point, just because they're really useless. And besides that, pretty much everything's the same. The Confederates did play the card that reduced strategic will by 1 for the Union, and I did subtract the 6 in the last episode for McDowell. So the correct strategic will is 94 to 123. So a nice lead for the Confederates. So that'll wrap up spring 1862. Come back with a summer turn. Alright, summer 1862. The Confederates put Jackson down in New Orleans. They're planning on sending him around to combat Rosecrans. And they put Longstreet in Dover, because they're expecting an attack there
on Fort Henry and Donelson. The Union put Pleasanton in with the Army of the Cumberland to help get rid of that -2 die roll modifier. Aside from that, I can show you the hands. So the Confederates first. Wilson's Raid, unplayable. Fortified lines, put 2 forts. That's nice, because we haven't really done much in the Mississippi as far as fort building. Ironclads, the Union would love this event. War in the West can remove a card. This is a big one. Union strategic will is reduced by 5 points. That would put them down below 80, so big time there. Southern Blockade, the Union would love it. CSA recognizes Kentucky, Missouri, Maryland, and Delaware. This might not be bad for a invasion of the North. I'm not sure if I want to go that route, just because I don't know if I see the advantage of it. But it might be used to put some strength points in with Van Dorn or something like that. We'll see. So overall, a good hand. No 1 cards. All 2s and 3s. So that should be pretty good as far as mobility goes. For the Union, we have a First Manassas, 3 card. Can't play it. Contraband of War. Interesting because they can remove 2 Confederate strength points of their choosing. Nathaniel Lyon, which flips some political control markers, is not as useful now. Washington Defenses, this one's very interesting because we could basically line the area around the Potomac with forts. There's already a fort in Washington, but we could line some forts around there and basically seal off the North from the typical invasion of the North that Lee does. Issues of Mark, unplayable. Mosby's Raiders, unplayable. And Costly Mistake, which I really want to use, and I'll probably spring first, because Lee is in the Army of Northern Virginia and has not been promoted to the commanding general yet. So if I play this, there's a chance that we could remove Lee from the game. So this is going to be the first thing we do, because we don't want them switching that up. Either way, we're going to get Beauregard, Lee, or Stewart, at least for a turn. So I figured it's a decent go-around. So Costly Mistakes, we get to pick an army with 2 or more subordinate generals, which will be the Army of Northern Virginia, randomly determine a target. So we're going to grab Beauregard, Lee, and Stewart. Just going to give these a shake. And let's roll 1 at random. And the chosen general is Stewart. And that's not bad, because getting rid of cavalry generals is also useful, because he's a good one. And the Confederates have a lot of them, but getting rid of them is big, because it hinders some of them. Alright, so on a roll of 1 to 3, he is killed and removed from the game. On a die roll of 4 to 6, he's wounded and removed from play, but it'll come back next turn. And that's a 3, which means Stewart is killed. And of course, he is killed during the war. It's just not until later during the war. So Stewart's out. Means there is no cavalry general in the Army of Northern Virginia, which the Army of the Potomac could use. It would give them some good modifiers. The defense modifiers would be 5, 6, -2 would be 4, and their plus modifiers would be just 1. So not great, but just adds to the ability to attack them. Alright, with that out of the way, it'll be over to the Confederates. So the Confederates played the card that allowed them to place 2 forts, and they did so in Vicksburg and Memphis. I thought about New Orleans, but went ahead with these 2. So the Union are launching an attack with their 3 card. It's going to be Halleck with a land invasion on Columbus. So Polk has no modifiers, 2 strength points, and the Virginia won't count because it's not a amphibious assault. So it'll just be +2 for him, +1 for Halleck. and he has 6, so he'll get an additional +2 for 3-to-1 odds. So it'll be +3 for Halleck and +2 for Polk. And it's a medium battle. So on the medium table, the defender has a 4. It's modified by 1, 2 to a 6, which is still a 1. The defender rolls a 3, which is modified by 3 to a 6, which is a 2. So actually the Union is successful here. They will eliminate Polk. He'll go on the game track for next turn. The Virginia will be eliminated, I believe. I'll double check. And so is the Fort. And he can go into this space. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he could move again if he wanted to. He's not. He's just going to use a strength point or a movement point to capture the space. And he's reduced down to 5. So that's a major development because it's good that the Confederates did play that, because otherwise they would have control all the way down to New Orleans if they hadn't put that fort in Memphis. So that's going to open up a land invasion on Memphis, and there are no troops there to hold it. So Johnson's probably going to have to dispatch somebody like Kirby Smith to go over 2, 3, 4, and he'll be able to make it there. So he'll probably have to hunker in there with some strength points, and that should be okay because the Army of the Tennessees kind of hold up in Nashville. But that's the sort of progress that the Union needs to be making here. And I was supposed to adjust this track because of the fort loss. I forgot about that. It is -1 to the Confederacy, which is going to be a 4 actually. 2, 3, 4 because of the fortunes of war, and they're going to gain 1. So that will actually be 3. 1, 2, 3. So the new total is 119 to 97, which won't be a problem for the Confederates because they have this big lose 5 in their hand. Alright, so the few things that have happened since. Once Columbus fell, Kirby Smith came out this way and went over to Memphis to reinforce that position to ensure that Halleck couldn't just slide in. And then the Union played the contraband of war card and targeted Nashville and Dover, and doing so in Dover eliminated the force there. It doesn't say you can't do that. There may be somewhere in the rules where it says you can never remove the last strength point, but I didn't see it. So that eliminated Longstreet, which forced them kind of into a tizzy. They ended up moving Kirby Smith from Memphis to Dover. They don't want to weaken the position in Nashville anymore because there's only 4 strength points there. And they wanted to move Pemberton back from Texas, but because they lost the fort in Columbus, they can't move through New Madrid, which is how they can go from Dover to Marshall so easily. So they had to move Smith. Polk started a move this way, and they are going to take Kentucky at the end of the turn, supposing that nothing interferes with that. And so Pope is threatening. But now the move that I'm going to make, and I'm not sure if it's allowed, someone can tell me, is I'm going to move the Army of the Cumberland. But when I move, I'm going to leave Buell. Or you know what? Yeah, I guess I'll leave Buell. I'm going to leave Buell with 2 strength points. And that's the question. I don't know if you can. Like, I'm activating this general, Burnside, and I'm moving everyone. Does that mean that I can, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that or not. So I have to have that question answered. I'm just leaving him. I'm not taking him with me. So I don't know what that is. But I'm going to move 1, 2. I'm going to pick up Pope. So he's going to go back into the army display. He's going to give 3 back to the strength of the army, pushing it up to 10. And we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Continue to march through eastern Tennessee. With the intention of striking Nashville from the rear at some point. But I've been working out a way to figure out how to leave troops there, because if I don't, then I know they'll just send somebody up this way and prevent us from taking Kentucky. Now they can still do that by taking Paducah, but it's not a huge deal if they decide to do that. They can just move him 1, 2, 3 and come back, and we won't have the requisite number, which isn't a big deal. But you'll have to tell me whether or not I'm allowed to leave forces. I'm not even dropping off, really. I'm just leaving. So I'm assuming if I can drop off, I can probably leave. But anyways, that'll have to be confirmed. So with the Confederates now, they are, obviously threatened from the rear. And this is what you're supposed to be doing as the Confederate player. You're supposed to be, unable to figure out all the threats and where they're all coming from and how you're going to best deal with them. Because you need to be stretched like that in order to really get the full effect. So it prevents you from doing other things. So for Johnston here, there is a 3 card. We could build a fort and just kind of settle in Nashville, hoping that when the attack does come, we'll have a little bit better odds. Or we could move out and strike against Buell. We only have 4 strength points, though, so it's not very likely that we'll be successful in doing that. So I'm going to take a look at it just to be sure I'm making the right decision. So the Confederates did put the fort up in Nashville, but the Union are actually going to do something else. Instead, they kind of lulled them into thinking more about Nashville and those 5 strategic points. What they're actually going to do is go 1, 2, 3. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of put these in here too. Not that that really matters. What's that last card we have? Okay, it's a 1 strength. That doesn't do us anything. I'm going to attack Dover, and we've got really good odds. So it's likely that we'll take it. My worry is that we fail, we're going to be out of supply. So I could send Polk instead. Sorry, not Polk, Pope. Send him with like 6 strength points to go and do the attack, and he'll pretty much have the same odds. That way, at least, we should be in good shape regardless of what happens. He would be out of supply, but the army would only have 4 strength points and would be in supply, so I'm not really sure even then if that's all that important. If we attack with the full army, we get a +3, plus a bunch more, and then we're worried about possibly losing somebody. So yeah, that's what we're going to do instead. We're going to leave the Army of the Cumberland, and we are once again going to detach Pope, who has been very useful. He's a really good leader, especially early, because he has that offensive capability and can go out and be detached as a corps leader, which is indispensable. So he's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and can attack. So he can actually keep a supply line in case it fails. Now, of course, they can just cut the supply line by sending out Forrest, but it's better than not having a supply line. So they're going to attack with 6 against Kirby Smith, who has 1 strength point, +1 himself, and a +2. So he's going to have +3. And the Union is going to get the +4 for the 5-to-1 odds. So it's going to be 4, and then his will be 5. So it's going to be a +5 for them, +3 for the Confederates. It's going to be a medium battle. Alright, decent for the Union. Sorry, let me get that fully in there. 5 and a 2. So that'll be a 5 on the medium battle. Defender result will be a 5 plus another 5. We'll put them down to 10. So they do have to make a roll for Pope, which is unfortunate. But they're going to do 3. And I worried about that, but I really didn't want to lose this. I probably should have sent like 4 instead of 6. And then I would have gotten a 3. But anyways, my worry was I would roll a 1 and then end up, losing. Okay, so they're going to have a 2 plus 3. We'll put them down to 5, which is a 1. So they're going to win this for sure. That 1's going to go away. Smith's going to go away till next turn. The fort will go away, and they'll be able to take Dover, opening up the Cumberland and the Tennessee. They themselves will lose just 1. And now I'm going to have to check on the roll for Pope. So since it was an attack of odds 3 to 1 or greater, so it was 6 to 1, I don't have to make the roll for Pope, so that's okay. So we're all good in that department. So that's perfect, because now Nashville is isolated, and which it won't be out of supply, I don't believe. I don't think it has to trace. I don't think a resource space has to trace supply to another resource space. I think it can supply its own supply. But I'll double check just to be sure that it doesn't also have to trace to somewhere else, in which case it would be out of supply. But it's going to open up both these rivers, which is going to allow supply to be brought in that way if needed. And that's the big step, is taking out Dover and then opening up either Memphis or Columbus or wherever that first Confederate fort is. So both of those goals have been accomplished. It took a little bit longer than I wanted to. I really wanted to have this done by like fall 1861, so we're a couple turns behind. But we're getting there. Now it's going to be concentrating these. I would absolutely love a major major offensive or a major campaign. I'd love a major campaign card to come up next turn so we can do all 3 of these forces and just triangulate them on Nashville and crush Johnston and the Army of Tennessee, get the resource base, the fort, and destroy the army all with one attack. That would just be incredible. And that's going to be something for Johnston to think about, because is those 5 strategic will points that valuable? Or is it better just to retreat, south and hold? They're not going to be able to, remember, because they lost the Tennessee, they can't retreat west. They've pretty much cut the Confederacy in half, and it doesn't look like that since they only took the space, but when you consider the entire map, it's kind of a choke point, because the only other spaces that they can actually go, this is really considered east and west right here. This is the line. But you can even subdivide the west into 2. And the crossing points are Dover, Pittsburgh Landing, Tuscumbia, Demopolis, and Mobile. So they're not going to be able to go across in Pittsburgh, because that one's going to be closed. So Tuscumbia is going to be the long way around. So he could retreat this way. But that's a very narrow area. And then the next closest one is all the way down here in Demopolis or Mobile. So it's very long distance if we are unable to hold this position. So the worry here is about, if we go east, then the west is vulnerable, whereas the same way other way around. So if this 5 isn't that necessary, then it may make more sense to just try and retreat out east and just put ourselves in between the Union and Atlanta, because there's a lot of resource spaces down in Georgia. The problem is that Tennessee is worth 10 strategic will, Nashville is worth 5, Memphis is worth 5. There's a lot in that state, and we don't want to lose it, even though it looks like that may not be an option at this point. So they'll have to decide whether or not they're going to retreat, which it looks like they may. Okay, so I just wrapped up the summer turn, and it actually would have been out of supply. You have to be able to trace supply to another resource space in order for Nashville to be in supply. So it would have been out. They debated about retreating. They decided to stay. They sent out Forrest to recapture these spaces and then to threaten the Army of the Cumberland's rear. It's not that big of a deal that they don't take that space and cut them out of supply, because they are on very low strength points anyways, so it wasn't that big of a deal if they ended up foraging. Plus, they can't receive reinforcements, I don't believe, because there's no railroad and no river. So Pope and Buell could receive it, but not Burnside and the Army of the Cumberland. So this will set up an interesting situation for next turn. Usually I split, 4 and 3 on the Confederate reinforcements. I'll send 4 to one side and 3 to the other. So maybe 4 to the east and 3 to the west, or 4 to the west and 3 to the east. Usually kind of split it as evenly as I can, because both are important. But there's not much going on in the east, so most likely almost all of those 7 strength points are going to go to the west, some of which will go to Nashville, and the others will likely go to somewhere like Toloma, or somewhere, maybe Chattanooga, to provide some cover for Nashville, and try and give them a lifeline that they really need, because somebody like Longstreet's going to be coming up next turn, and we may move Jackson up. Could even create Army of Mississippi and use them in this area as well. I'm not sure who I would put in command of it. Johnston might not be a bad idea. I might relieve Johnston, bring in Lee as the head of the Army of Northern Virginia, or even could send Lee out west. That's one thing. I think there's an optional rule that you can't, or maybe that's in U.S. Civil War, that you can't put Lee in the west and that Grant can't go to the east until a certain time. I think that's U.S. Civil War, because Grant comes in much earlier in that game. But obviously Lee didn't go west and probably would have never gone west in any circumstances. I can't imagine. But, we're not here to be exactly accurate. We're here to be to a certain point. But anyways, so that will do it for this turn. Just to close out the final sequence, I'll have to go through the political control phase. So Kentucky does have enough to change over, and once a state changes over to the Union, one of these border states, it can't come back. It can fall under the penalty, whereas if you take 3 spaces in that state, the Confederates will get a bonus. So it can apply. It basically acts as if it was a northern state. It can't go back to the Confederacy. So they'll lose 10 strategic will, which will bring them down from 119 to 109, and will take the Union up from 89 to 99. So now there's a 10-point gap in the strategic will, and we'll remove all these markers. But aside from that, the situation is West Virginia and Kentucky are now controlled by the Union, and it's looking not bad so far for the Union. We'll have to see if they can thwart the Confederacy here, because reinforcements are definitely coming in, but they might be able to pull something out. Plus, there's going to be reinforcements from the east, because they've kind of overran themselves out there. So we're at summer 1862. Here's the hand for the Confederates. They have 3 cigars, which is an automatic intercept card for 1 or 2 spaces, simulating the capturing of information before the Battle of Sharpsburg in Lee's first invasion of the North. We have the Trent Affair, which gives a big 5-point strategic will bonus. Farragut, which is unplayable. Good that the Union didn't get a hold of that. Cotton is King, which will give the Confederates some strategic, or strength points, sorry. Frederick Douglass, a big 3-point card. USS Cairo, which reduces the amphibious assault modifier, but that's 0. The Confederate locomotive shortage. So a couple of 3 cards, 2 good events.
and some other medium ones. So overall, not a bad hand. Over to the Union. One card is going to be pretty much unplayable, as well as the Southern Religious Revival, Confederate River Flotilla. Brazil recognizes the Confederacy, big three-pointer. Beaufort, Port Royal captured, increases the blockade level by 1, which is at 0, so that's the first one we've seen. Glory Hallelujah, which gives them some strength points. And then the naval program, Gideon Wells. And they can either do the blockade level by 1 or the amphibious assault modifier by 2. And they do want to pump that amphibious assault modifier up because it really restrains them from being able to attack these coastal forts. And, it's nice to hop on them early because a lot of them now have pretty considerable defenses. So you can only attack with 3 strength points. So getting that up as high as possible will be necessary in order to start to crack down on some of these blockade areas, some of these blockade ports. So interesting turn coming up ahead, and we'll hop right in with the Union. So all the action here through quite a few cards has been in the Tennessee area. Started off with Longstreet maneuvering up, kind of supporting this position in Nashville. I think you can intercept as a support, like if Nashville's being attacked, I think Longstreet can support that with an intercept. I'm not entirely sure. It's not detrimental if he can't, but this also protects Nashville's rear from an attack by Pope. So Longstreet's positioned there. Burnside's repositioned himself back around, leaving Eastern Tennessee, picking up Buell, and sitting in Bowling Green now, so that he can support an attack on Nashville, perhaps with Pope. And then the Union did something very interesting, because they had a 3 card that they weren't going to use for an event or anything. And so I figured, well, we'll do a naval invasion with that. And I wasn't sure. I was debating a few positions, maybe even attack on Memphis. But I decided the best thing to do would be, still trying to crack this Nashville nut, would be to send Halleck down from Columbus into Decatur. And the reason for this is now he can go and take these 3 spaces, and he will, or these 4 spaces, he'll have to take one in Decatur as well, and he will effectively cut off Nashville from any other resource hexes anywhere else, which will mean it'll be out of supply, and Johnston will have to take more, and Longstreet will have to take a forage as well as attrition. So that's just one way of cutting it off. And the best part about it is I combined it. So Halleck can only move with 3 strength points, of course, because he's on a naval move. So I left 3 strength points in Columbus. Well, when he got to Decatur, I played the card that gets you 3 strength points and increased his strength back up to 6. So I kind of transplanted him in the south, got him 3 more strength points. And now he'll be ready to go next turn. Don't have quite enough to do it this turn. But next turn he'll be ready to go in and strike and cut the supply. And Pope is going to actually wheel around on this turn and come over here to Clinton and prevent Forrest from raiding in the rear. But the Confederates have decided to respond to this with their own punch, and it's going to be here in Columbus. Jackson has come up from Louisiana, and he's going to strike in Columbus in hopes that he can dislodge those Union forces and then rebuild the Confederate fort that was there. That'll just help, re-establish the control in the north part of the Mississippi. He could have just jumped across to New Madrid and done the same thing, but it's pretty easy for that to get out of supply if the Union just takes Little Rock. Now, I don't think they're in really any position to do much in the west, the Trans-Mississippi, but I just like the idea of pushing the Union back out and reestablishing that in Columbus. So it's going to be 3 against 3,
And of course, Jackson has the +3 modifier, and Union has none. So battle roll for Jackson, but that's not too concerning. So it's going to be a medium battle, just barely. The defender gets a 6, which is a 1. Jackson gets a 2, which will be modified to a 5, which is also a 1. So actually the attack fails, and the Union forces will remain in the space, which is rather surprising. I did not expect Jackson to fail in this attack. So his forces will remain at Humboldt. And I'll go ahead and play the part of the Union. Sorry about that. They're still holding on to these 2 event cards with the amphibious assault and blockade, but they're going to play these 2 1 cards since they're pretty useless. They're going to go ahead and drop 1 into an operations queue on Pope, and they're going to use the other one on their next available turn to do the same thing. And now the Confederates are kind of in a odd spot. They're going to play Cotton as King, which is going to get them 2 strength points in any open blockade run reports, and they can only do 1 in each individual one. So that's the one thing, is they've had a lot of strength points come in this game, and they have a lot remaining by the coasts. I mean, there's 4 down in Florida. There's 2 in Savannah plus the fort. 1 in Wilmington plus the fort. 2 in Mobile. So, I mean, there's just strength points galore. They just can't move them all because they don't have the rail movement to do that, of course. So it's unfortunate for them because there's just a lot of points left over all over the place, but it's not detrimental because at some point in the war, these kind of are like reserves, and whenever states start to fall out, then they can start bringing these guys up. So it won't be detrimental. So that's the Confederate play. The Union's going to play this other 1 card that will activate Pope, and he is going to march around one, two, three, four, 5 over here to Clinton and block off Forrest from marching in. And this is part of what's necessary in order to seal Nashville off, because they need these 4 hexes here culminating in Chattanooga, and they also need this route to Richmond to be closed in order for it to work, because they've got the western side covered with the river. They're not too concerned about that. I'll have to think about it if the Confederates see this coming, because if they do, they're going to want to get Forrest on this side of this, because if he moves into here, he'll be stuck in between these guys. Now, he may be able to come through Jacksonville, Alabama, and sneak through these areas. I would think he would be able to, but I know there's special rules with that route that only the Confederates can use. So, if so, then he's fine. He can just sneak around and then can wreak some havoc, but otherwise he's going to be trapped on the wrong side. So, it'll be over to the Confederates now. I'm going to double check that rule and just think about that a little bit. So you can move through here. You just need to have played a 3 operations point card, and then you're good. So I'm going to leave Forrest on the side of it, but went ahead and moved Longstreet back to Chattanooga. And Chattanooga in this game and historically is a very important choke point, because at this point in the game there's only 2 places that the east meets the west, and that's Chattanooga with the rail lines and Mobile in the south. There is one that comes around in 1864 connecting Meriden, Mississippi and Demopolis, Alabama. But at this point, Chattanooga and Mobile are the only 2 places that you can get from east to west by rail. And it's a very influential area that, of course, sees a battle that involves around the valley. It's a very beautiful area and a great city, too, today. But he decided to retreat back there and sit in that position in case there does come to be an attack. And that was part of the Union objective too. They figured that the Confederates would probably catch wind of this and take steps to prevent it. But they knew that peeling off Longstreet was pretty much just as good, because now they can isolate Johnston regardless of what Longstreet's doing. You just can't be everywhere at one time. Plus, there's just more forces operating. I mean, they have 3 major forces in the area, whereas the Confederates have, 1.5 basically, with a cavalry brigade. So it's difficult to keep watch over all the possibilities while that's going on. I probably are going to see the Confederates move all 7 to the west again, which is difficult for the Union now because they're not diverting forces from the east. So they may start attacking Lee or I guess it's still not Lee, it's still Johnston, but start attacking in the east in order to bleed some strength points away and force them into playing some there. They're waiting for a campaign card, honestly. When they get a campaign card, they're going to do the Peninsula Campaign just to bring some attention over there, force a battle somewhere. They will go through with that, but they're looking for a campaign card to do it. Anyways, what's happened now is that Jackson is activating. This is going to be pretty much the last action of the turn. Jackson's going to be activated, and he's going to come down to Memphis and pick up Smith and these 2 strength points, come back up and attack Columbus. The point of this is he's trying to dislodge those forces as well as be able to march afterwards. Because what he wants to do, rather than build a fort in Columbus, I think, is build a fort in Paducah. Because Paducah cuts off the Ohio River and the Tennessee River. It does not cut off the Cumberland, but it's not that big of a deal. If they want to amphibious assault Nashville, have at it. But cutting off the supply to the Tennessee River would leave Halleck out of supply and would force them to pull back and dislodge Jackson there. It cuts off their maneuverability in Tennessee and northern Alabama. So this is a big one. Even if something were to happen where they destroy the force and don't get to advance, which I don't think is possible, they can still build it in Columbus. And I may still decide to build it in Columbus because padding Memphis and keeping it protected is important. So, I'll have to decide. But I like the idea of building one in Paducah because it prevents anyone coming down from the Ohio on an amphibious assault, and it also prevents the Tennessee from getting supply, which is very important. So Jackson has 4, Union has 2. It's going to be a medium battle, and Jackson has his die roll modifiers. And another bad roll for Jackson. He's not having any luck. So in the medium table, 5 unmodified will be a 1, and a 1 modified by 3 is a 1. So once again, he's unable to dislodge the Union forces on 2 attempts, which is just surprising. Even with support. And so that's going to fail, which is disappointing and unfortunate. The Union will play the naval program, the Gideon Wells card, to increase the amphibious assault by 2, which will put the amphibious assault to 2, the blockade to 1, so they will actually have to make blockade rolls now. And the Confederates are left with the Frederick Douglass card, which is kind of interesting because you want to use 3-point cards for forts if at all possible, but I don't really know where we would put one. New Orleans isn't a bad bet. I've thought about dropping one in Chattanooga because that will help protect that area, but then someone could just come down through East Tennessee, through the valley there, and just get to Atlanta from the rear. So it's kind of a vulnerable position to drop a fort into. But aside from that, there's not really anywhere else of merit to put a fort at this point. But then what do you do with a 3-point card? I thought about creating an army could give Jackson an army in the West. Maybe not put him as the command. I mean, he'd be the commander for now, but maybe remove Joe Johnston from the East, and then eventually put him in command of the Army of Mississippi in the West. Because to have another really strong, effective fighting force would be very useful. So I actually think that's what we're going to do. The problem will be that they'll have to lose some strategic will, but I think this is important. So they're going to play Frederick Douglass to build an army here. It's going to be the Army of the Mississippi. It's going to be relatively small for now. It's just going to be 3 strength points. And now Smith is a 6, and Jackson's a 2. I think if I create the army there and put Jackson as the head of it, then I'm going to lose 2 for that, and 2 for the fact that there is someone out there. Well, is there someone out there that has higher than a 6? I don't think there is, because, oh well, yeah, Lee is an 8. I guess he's not the commander of the army. So yeah, actually, we would lose 4 strategic will. Whereas if we just put Smith in, we'll just lose 2. And we're going to get the Fortunes of War penalty as well. So that's a lot going on there. It just depends if I want Jackson to lead the army. Because if I want Jackson to lead the army, then I can just take the penalty and say, forget it. I don't know. I mean, historically, I don't want to do it because Jackson was just not an army commander. He was, in my opinion, probably never going to be an army commander unless he survives until the very end of the war and, was taking over for someone like Hood, rather than Hood coming in and commanding the Army of the Tennessee, whether it was Jackson. But he's not an army commander. So from a historical perspective, I don't want to make him the commander. But having a 1-3-3, which is the same as Lee's ratings, in command of an army, is just really nice. So it's tempting, but I really don't know if I can do it or not. We would lose 4 plus the -3. We'd lose 7 strategic will if we did that and put Jackson at the head. Then we have to find something to do with Joe Johnston. If we removed him, we would lose 8 for that. So that's kind of tough as well. So, or we could just demote him. I guess we could leave him in the army with Lee, Beauregard. Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to make Jackson the head of the Army of the Mississippi. So we're going to lose 4 strategic will for that, plus another 3 because of the Fortunes of War, so 7 total, which is going to put us on 109 strategic will. In the Union, that'll put us on 99. So just a 10-point gap now. So that wraps it up for the turn. The situation is sustainable for the Confederates, especially considering they're going to get more reinforcements. The Union have kind of maxed themselves out everywhere. What they're really going to be doing now is just reinforcing from attrition and then maybe maxing out the Army of the Cumberland. But the fall of Nashville is coming, and it's good for the Confederates that it's like this because they're wasting time worrying. I mean, the Union should already have most of Tennessee conquered at this point. The fact that they only control 4 hexes is not great. So, if they can hold on until 1863, I mean, that will be great because they're going to be pretty far behind schedule. And they haven't even managed to get the Confederates down out of 100 strategic will yet. So things are pretty much status quo. So it's going to have to ramp up, and they're going to have to do a better job here going through. All right, that's it for 1862, the summer turn, over to the fall. Here we go on the fall 1862 turn. Dealt out the hands and got everything ready to go. I'll go ahead and show you the Confederates first. Have pre-war treachery, which this is nice because we'll get some force on the Mississippi. This is really nice if you can get this like at the beginning, because then you could
like seal off Northern Virginia or something like that. But these are really good for the Mississippi and sealing it up, maybe putting something down in New Orleans or New Madrid or something like that. So very useful still. Naval Union supply shortage. The blockade is currently at 1, so that's good. Cape Hatteras operations off the coast of North Carolina and the Outer Banks. Admiral Porter, once again, it can't be used. The CSS Tennessee. I forget where the Virginia is. It's somewhere. It's in, no. We put the Virginia somewhere, but I don't remember where we put it. We didn't put it in Columbus, did we? Anyways, maybe we didn't play it, but I thought we did. Anyways, another ironclad can go on the board and give a bit of a bonus. I think maybe we put it in Columbus and it got attacked by land. And then the Union siege guns, which obviously can't be done in the Monitor fleet. So this is a decent hand, some high cards, and some good Union cards that you kept out of their hand otherwise, especially having to do with the blockade level and the amphibious assault. Now for the Union, they have a 3 card that has to do with blockade runners. Draft Riots, 2 card. Commerce Raiders, the Alabama. The Emancipation Proclamation, again, they're going to go for it and try and get this in because they're in another fall turn. So this would mean they would lose another 5 strategic will unless they can switch this over to the Confederates with the Emancipation Proclamation. More blockade runners. Kansas coming into the Union, which isn't really all that great. And the Great Sioux Uprising, which lets them get rid of a commanding general. This actually could be really nice. So all in all, there are some pretty good high cards that are Confederate events. So you're not wasting anything. Got the Emancipation Proclamation, so they're going to try and force something here and maybe get that off because they weren't able to last time, and it's important that they do so. And this would actually be the exact same time that it happened historically. So that would be apropos at least. So the first opening few cards, the Union played the Great Sioux Uprising to get rid of old Ben Butler because he's awful. That'll free up for whenever they create armies in the future, which they did on a subsequent turn by creating the Army of the Tennessee with Halleck down in Decatur. And he was the highest ranking non-commanding general, so they didn't have to take any strategic will hits for that. And then the Confederates built 2 forts, one just off screen in New Madrid, the other down in New Orleans. And I think that's it thus far. Maybe there's one more card that I'm missing. But anyways, the Union are now moving for an attack here to try and get this Emancipation Proclamation card out by forcing a battle. Wasn't exactly sure where they wanted to deal this blow at, but they decided they're going to do it with the Army of the Cumberland, but not on Nashville, because the role there, the modifiers there just aren't great. They're not terrible, but they're not great either. So they're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and with their 6th attack, the Confederate Army of Mississippi, which is commanded by General Stonewall Jackson. Had to take a big hit for him to command that army, but it's the decision that I made. So the strength points of the Army of the Cumberland is 13 as compared to 7 strength points for the Army of the Mississippi. This will be a large battle, will it? Yes, because it's it is exactly 20 strength points. So we're at a large battle. First one of these we've had. Alright, low rolls. 2 and a 1. Now the Union has a +2, 3 to their die roll. Make sure there's no other ones. They don't have 3 to 1 odds. And nothing else. So they're going to be at +3, which will get them up to a 4. And the Confederates have a +3, +4, but they don't have a cavalry general. So it's only down to a +2, which will take them as well down to a 4. So probably not enough, but let's see. So over here on the table, the defenders roll a 4, which will inflict 3, and the attackers roll a 4, which will inflict 3. So they both do 3, which means it is a draw, and no one wins. Or the defender wins if it's a draw, however you want to say it. They definitely don't win, the attackers, so. But that'll drop it down to 6, 5, 4 strength points, and will drop the Army of the Cumberland down to 10. And they could be reinforced by Hooker, who has a lot of troops. He has 6 strength points, which could very well get them back up to getting some bonus odds. And they could attack here again, but Jackson may just retreat into Memphis, where he has the defense of a fort, because staying out in the open with these sort of numbers is really just not good. So the Emancipation Proclamation will still have to wait, because they are not successful at the Battle of Humboldt. The Confederates moved Jackson back into Memphis, so sealing that up. And the Union is going to keep pressing and try and get this medium or large battle victory. But it's not going to come in the west where we thought it was. It's going to come in the east. And once again, not where you're expecting. These frontal assaults just don't work as far as the die roll modifiers go. So they're going to play a 3 card to activate the Army of the Potomac. McClellan is going to move. And he's going to go to Frederick and drop off 5 strength points. He starts with 15. So I'll drop him down to 10. So he'll leave 5. So that'll be 1, 2, 3. He'll pick up McDowell, who has 2 strength points. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he'll attack Price. So total of 12 strength points against 2 strength points, and the modifiers are going to be pretty high. So for the Union, it's going to be a +2 for the generals and a +4 for the force modifier, because it's 2 against 12. So pretty high. So it'll be the 4 plus the 2, it'll be +6, and then it will be a +1 for Price, who is just out of his depth here. And the medium and large battles, to me, like, you could attack a strength point of 1 with a strength point of 12, and that would be considered a large battle. And I'll make sure that that's correct, but it seems to me as though the battle should be based off of how much each side have. So a medium battle should be, 6 or higher, as long as, each force has at least 3 or something like that. And maybe there's a reason it's not like that, or maybe it is like that, and I just don't realize it. But it says medium battle is 6 or more strength points. I don't think there's any conditions on that. But anyways, this is just a way of not having to force a battle with a relatively large force. We can just overpower. So it'll be a +6 for the Union, +1 for the Confederates, and it's going to be some pretty high numbers, a 6 and a 5. That 6 is going to be modified to a 12, and the problem is they could lose a general, which is the worry when you have so many. But the problem really for the Union isn't losing generals, because they have plenty of bad ones to burn through. It's really more the Union. The Confederates have to worry about that. So this 5 is going to get modified to a 6. So that 6 will give them on the medium table a result of 1. And the Union is going to be up to a 10 plus, which will give them a 3 asterisk, so they're going to lose 1 themselves. And that force will be eliminated. But both sides are going to have to, the Union is going to have to make a roll to see if they lose a general. So, I believe they both have to. And for the Union, they a leader is killed on a 1-3. And for the Union, for the Confederates, it would be, since they did not roll greater than a 10, they have someone killed on a 1. So let's just roll and see. So it's double 5s. So it is no casualties either way, regardless of which way you look at it. Everyone is fine. And we'll pan back up. So Price is eliminated entirely. He'll go on to the track for next turn. And I guess he can pick up McDowell. We'll go ahead and slide McDowell into the army. And we can leave him behind later, if needed. And so that was 1, 2, 3, 4. And they can continue moving because they were more than double the strength. So that's why they left this force there, because they couldn't get back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They could get back to Harper's Ferry, which DC is probably secured, so it's not really that important that they get back. So they could instead 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and could even attack the Confederates from the rear. Now it's not much point, because otherwise they would have just done it from the start. So I think they're just going to convert Culpeper, or Strasburg, and remain there. Because they might be able to force the Confederates out of Manassas this way. And they could actually leave McDowell here and keep going, but they don't want to get cut off. Because that would be difficult. So they're going to leave it like that is. So the Confederates pulled back from Manassas to Hanover, which is a spot they can defend the capital from, while also still giving them some flexibility from being penned in, actually in Richmond. Otherwise, if they sit in Richmond, they can be blocked from going up north, and it's just not ideal. So this gives them some flexibility. The Union, as was historical in fall of 1862, fall or winter, after a victory in the Eastern Theater, are going to enact the Emancipation Proclamation. So the Confederates will lose 10 strategic will. They're currently at 109, so that's going to go down to 99. And the Union also just happens to be at 99, but they're going to lose 5. So it's 99 to 94, which is much more manageable than what it was. Also, that'll flip the game turn marker to the emancipation side, which means that at the end of the turn, the Confederates are going to lose 5 more strategic will. So that's good to get this out, because they've already lost 5 strategic will the Union has from the fall of 61. So to not have to be taking that penalty, getting out as soon as you can, it's extra nice. And I also believe that eliminates the chance of foreign intervention. So now they don't have to worry about that anymore. Not that it was a huge concern, but this definitely puts them on the right track of where they want to be. And things are now slowly starting to look up for the Union, especially in the West, where they've kind of lacked a little bit of oomph. But things should start to get going now. All right, just wrapped up the fall 1862 term. Not much happened there at the end. The Union with Rosecrans advanced up to Nacogdoches, tried to dislodge Pemberton out of Marshall, which would wrap up Texas and give them 7 strategic will points, but they were unable to do so. I can almost guarantee that they will be able to do so next turn, because Pemberton's in a pretty weak position, as long as they're reinforced. The other major thing was the Army of the Tennessee abandoned Nashville. That was a lot of discussion over this decision, but the way it looks right now is they had Longstreet in Chattanooga guarding the gap, which it's perfect that the map, this was obviously an intentional design to make the choke point in Chattanooga.
But with the Army of the Tennessee down in Decatur and Pope in the north, there wasn't really much that Johnston could do in Nashville if the Army of the Tennessee dislodged Longstreet, who was in Chattanooga, because at that point you're pretty much trapped. And I didn't want to be in the situation where we're looking backwards towards the south, and there's an army who's both larger and with better generals because Grant's coming in, and I can imagine he's going to be in the Army of the Tennessee. So that would have not been good. And then you're saying you're going to lose 9 strength points at least, probably more than that because they're going to get reinforced. So they probably could have slugged it out, but that was just on the wrong side of the divide they wanted to be on. So it's 5 strategic will points in Nashville, which isn't the end of the world. They're going to cede quite a few in this area as well. There's you can count those up and say that's a pretty good number. A chunk of Tennessee you're going to give away, but in the end, I don't see putting the Army of Tennessee at risk being worth it for Nashville. So we'll see and then plus that has to change the Union's stance. They're going to have to probably pull somebody back, like the Army of the Cumberland or somebody, and we're going to get the Army of Missouri, full 4 armies operating once Cairo and Hooker get in charge, and we may even put Meade in command of that army at some point. But we're barely getting started here as the Union, getting the gears going, which is disappointing because we're going to be moving into 1863, and the war effort isn't really where we want it to be. So it's going to be a crunch going into the last half of the game, because that's pretty much where we're at right now. The Confederates are going to lose 5 strategic will because of war guilt, but that's the only penalties they're going to face, which will mean that the Union will be ahead in strategic will overall, but not nearly where they need it to be. So it's going to have to be in hyperdrive mode here in the last 2 years or so of the war, because the Union did not do enough early enough to really make inroads and do something that was meaningful. But on to the next episode.